Logic for homeschoolers, or for anyone, a very brief introduction to basic logic, still using the textbook I'm writing myself for my own kids, but watch the first video in this series to know where my ideas come from, what textbooks I've studied, but it looks like we're citing one almost immediately in this video. In this video, after a very brief introduction to, in the last video, what are we even studying when we study logic, let's talk about what even is logic. Let's start at the beginning, or just one small step past the very beginning from the last video, looking at some basic concepts. What is logic? Logic is the study of methods and principles used to distinguish correct from incorrect reasoning. Now that's Copy's definition of logic from his book, Introduction to Logic, or Using the Power of Logic by Layman, later editions revised by Wasserman, Howard Snyder, and Howard Snyder. Logic is the study of methods for examining whether the premises of an argument adequately support the conclusion. Notice we already have four interconnected vocabulary terms: logic, argument, introduction, and conclusion. And we need another one too, proposition. So let's get those terms sorted out immediately. A proposition is an assertion that something is the case. Every proposition is either true or false. Oh, and the word statement is synonymous with proposition. And you can expect me to use either or both without always pausing to make any distinction or even to notice that I've switched from one word to the other, because they're totally equivalent. An argument is a group of propositions of which one, the conclusion, is claimed to follow from the others, called the premise, or the other or others, the premise or premises, and they are regarded as supporting the conclusion. A premise is a proposition which is supposed to support the conclusion, or is regarded as supporting the conclusion, and the conclusion is the proposition which the premises are supposed to support or regarded as supporting. In other words, an argument means, here's the simpler description of what these words all mean. An argument means giving reasons for things. A premise is a reason. A conclusion is a thing we give reasons for. Every argument has a conclusion and at least one premise. Sometimes arguments come with extra steps or stages, though, where some things get their own reasons and then get used as reasons for other things. And that should have been its own paragraph. So one more definition will be helpful. A subconclusion is a step in an argument or proposition in an argument which is supported by other propositions in the argument, but is itself intended to support the argument's main conclusion. In other words, it's a premise with respect to the final conclusion of the argument, but it has its own premises supporting it. So in the chain of arguments in the movie Legally Blonde, we had some subconclusions. The movie didn't state them explicitly, but I do in the textbook I'm writing. And so I state them and I underline them here to illustrate. The protagonist of the movie Legally Blonde says something along these lines. The defendant exercises, and people who exercise have endorphins. People with endorphins are happy. Happy people don't kill their husband, so the defendant is innocent. She did not kill her husband. And so some unstated steps here are: the defendant has endorphins, and the defendant is a happy person. Now, running through the whole thing, the defendant exercises. People who exercise have endorphins. Therefore, subconclusion, the defendant has endorphins. And people who have endorphins are happy, so therefore the defendant is a happy person. Subconclusion. And since happy people don't kill their husbands, final premise, therefore the defendant did not kill her husband. Now, some reasons are better than other reasons. Some reasons are terrible. In other words, some premises do a good job supporting their conclusion and some don't. Some premises guarantee their conclusion, meaning the premises cannot be true and the conclusion false at the same time. All people have noses. Confucius is a person, therefore Confucius has a nose. If those premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. Some premises only make their conclusion probable. I enjoyed every Discworld book I've read by Terry Pratchett so far, so I'll probably enjoy the others if I read more. It's possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false, but it's not likely. Now, the point of studying logic is to learn to tell whether the premises of an argument do enough to support their conclusion. How much is enough? Well, it depends. If it's an argument where the premises are supposed to guarantee the conclusion, then enough is 100% perfection. The premises have to do it. Or the argument fails at its intention of guaranteeing the conclusion. For probabilistic arguments, enough is enough, and you have to pay attention to the real ultimate point of the argument. Context will matter a lot. If I'm just trying to decide whether I'm going to spend a little more money and a little more time reading a Terry Pratchett book, when if I wasn't reading that, I'd probably be reading something else anyway. 55% probability is probably good enough. For for other things. Maybe this will come up later in our notes, but I'll say it now anyway. Russian roulette. For pointing a gun at my head and risking my life, 5 out of 6 odds is not good. Not good enough. Not good enough. But for deciding whether to read a Terry Pratchett book, even 55% probability would be plenty. So this all matters. Logic matters because people are giving us reasons to believe things all the time. And sometimes we also give people reasons to believe things. So we need to know if the reasons are good enough. That's it. That's why this stuff matters. And it matters a great deal. Now, we need to talk about propositions just a little bit more before we go any further. Some synonyms for proposition are statement, assertion, claim, and sentence. And proposition and statement are the synonymous words I'll be using a lot. Sometimes I say assertion or claim. I will rarely say sentence. In this class, or in this video series, expect me to use proposition and statement interchangeably. But let's talk about propositions and sentences. The word sentence is used even in some logic textbooks, but it's not the best synonym because not all sentences express propositions directly. Declarative mood sentences, like some pizzas have pepperoni, express propositions directly, but sentences in the interrogative mood don't seem to express propositions at all, like, did you do your logic homework, or do your homework? Although actually, I think probably we can say with at least some plausibility that propositions in the sentences in the imperative mood do express proposition, like it is the case that you need to do your homework or something like that. I think imperative mood sentences might express propositions. Nevertheless, there's some subtlety there, and maybe they don't. They certainly don't seem to, at first glance, express propositions, and sentences in the interrogative mood don't express propositions at all, except when they do, like in a rhetorical question. In a rhetorical question, like when Lisa Simpson says, can there be any doubt that global warming is the result of human activity? Well, yeah, there can, but that's not the point. When she says that, she's expressing the proposition that there can be no doubt, or maybe she means there can no longer be any reasonable doubt or something like that. Let's not evaluate that, but this is an interrogative sentence that Lisa Simpson uses, and it's a rhetorical question. It's actually expressing a proposition. But usually questions don't express propositions, even if they're sentences. And imperative mood sentences are subtle at best, and they don't appear at first glance to express propositions at all. So you could define proposition as a claim that can be translated into the declarative mood. That would be a pretty good definition of a proposition. So what do we learn from all this? Some sentences don't express propositions at all. So propositions are not the same thing as sentences. But also, even if we use declarative mood sentences that express propositions, the same proposition can be expressed in very different sentences. So I can use different sentences in different languages, totally different sentences, to say the same proposition. I can say, Isa acha admihe in Urdu, and Jesus is a good man in English, and they mean the same thing, unless I botch the Urdu. Isa acha admihe. I'm quite sure that's correct Urdu, unless my accent was poor. So these are two different sentences, but they say exactly the same proposition. Propositions are sometimes expressed indirectly in sentences that are not in the declarative mood. Rhetorical questions. Oh, and here's a better example, not Lisa Simpson, but Paul in Acts 19. Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of Ephesians is a worshiper of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm using public domain translations here. Let's just put this in simpler English, paraphrase it. Or I could pause and find the ESV or something, but let's just paraphrase it. Oh, men of Ephesus, doesn't everybody know that the city of the Ephesians worships the great goddess Diana, whose image fell down from the sky? This is a rhetorical question. It is implicitly saying, everyone knows this. And then one more lesson about propositions. One more? I think it's just one more for the end of lesson 2. Some propositions are made of other propositions, like if it's raining, then the ground is wet. How many propositions are there in this sentence? You should count before reading further. Oh, well, I may have ruined it for you, but pause the video if you haven't and read this for yourself. If it's raining, then the ground is wet. How many propositions are there? Well, you might say there's the proposition, it is raining, and the proposition, the ground is wet. And if you said those two propositions were in the sentence, you're correct. But if you said there's only two propositions in the sentence, you were missing one. That sentence actually has three propositions. It has the proposition, it is raining. It has the proposition, the ground is wet. And then it has the combined proposition, if it's raining, then the ground is wet. So this sentence is expressing one proposition that is made of two other propositions. So there's three propositions there. There's it is raining, there's the ground is wet, and then there's the combined proposition, the compound proposition made of those two simple propositions. If it's raining, then the ground is wet. And now we need to formally state those propositions. A proposition not made of any other propositions is called a simple proposition or an atomic proposition. A proposition that is made of other propositions is called a compound proposition or a complex or molecular proposition. Now, just as I will switch back and forth without even always noticing it myself between proposition and statement, I will also switch back and forth between simple and atomic propositions. They mean the same thing. One final brief observation. I've been confused about this myself in the past, and it's a very understandable confusion, but a simple negation or denial is a complex proposition because it's made up of the statement. It's denying. And since most of you have no idea what I just said, let me say it again by example. Standard example from the last video, we can use it again. The teacup is full. That's a proposition. It's an atomic proposition. It's not made of any other proposition. But look, the teacup's actually empty. So if I say the teacup is not full, or it's not the case that the teacup is full, that's a compound proposition because it's made of the simpler proposition, the teacup is full. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.